Gideon turned him down. Gideon was a man who had integrity. He said, no, you don't need a king to rule over you. You got the King of Kings. So Gideon turned him down. But as the scripture continues to go, Gideon had a son by the name of Abimelech. And maybe I'm mixing these names up, but he had a son. Abimelech wasn't quite as humble as his father. He wanted to be the king. Matter of fact, he only ruled for 3 years in the book of Judges. And in those 3 years, he tore down everything his father built. What are you saying, Pastor? I'm saying that there can be some good men building a foundation that will last for a long time, and then you got these bozos that come in here and tear it down in 3 years. It's kind of like a father instilling his daughter with everything she needs. And then she meet this bozo and he done debunked everything in 2 weeks, what it took him 16 years to build. And this long curly haired fella with brown eyes and the good looks of his daddy done come in 2 weeks and tore down everything it took me 16 years to build. The devil is a lie. So Abimelech, he goes in and tears up everything his father's built. As a matter of fact, if it ain't so absurd to you, he had 70 brothers. Gideon had 70 sons. Abimelech killed them all but one. So he wouldn't have anybody to refute. This is the children of Israel. This is their story. It mirrors ours so well that we're afraid to look at it. How many times have you knocked your brother down to get where you wanted to be? How many times have you not spoken positively about him or her when somebody asked you when it was a situation or a season of power for them? How many times were you drinking that Gatorade? Or he all right, but if it were my business, I don't know if I'd hire him to be the CEO. How many times? He killed all his brothers but one, Jotham, who spoke against him. All these things that happened in family. There was even a civil war that happened in the nation of Israel. They wiped out a whole tribe of Benjamin. I'm saying all this to point out to you how crazy things were getting. And they're free now. They're not slaves anymore. They're free to be who God called them to be. But now all of this craziness all of a sudden begins to plague their lives. The Ark of the Covenant was stolen and returned. They're falling in and out of love with God. They're following a little bit for this season, and then next season they don't want nothing to do with church. They follow along for this season. They come in hot and ready to go, ready to get started on the ministry that God had put in their heart. And then all of a sudden something go wrong and things don't go the way they think they should go. Or somebody tell them something that's right and they don't agree with it. And all of a sudden they don't want nothing to do with church no more. This is what's happening here. As the children of Israel journey into the place that's flowing with milk and honey that God called them to be in. These are all the things that has happened. When we get up to around 1 Samuel 7 and 4, there's a new day. This man begins to call on the people. God uses him and the obedience of the people in their prayers. Because of that, the Lord gave them victory over the Philistine army. And Samuel began to be the judge over Israel and the nation. Brings us to the text this morning. So as Samuel is aging, he appointed his sons to rule over the people. Just to give you a context of the time and what's going on here. Samuel was a righteous man. Samuel also understood that people did not need a king. Do we realize God made us a special people? He called us to be anointed and set apart. We don't need a king to do, how to do, when to do. And so Samuel was grieved. He stopped and even blamed himself, Reverend. He said, what have I done so terrible? I don't get it. What have we done so terrible in leadership? What have we, as the body, as children, done? Figure this out. That God doesn't want us to elevate. He simply wants us to serve him. About it. So as Samuel ages, he but they didn't share in their father's heart. They didn't share in his passion and his righteousness for living. So the people desired a king. Put a pin right there. Samuel begins to be depressed about his leadership and he's going through, because he's trying to figure out why the people are just walking away. I can't understand this. It's simple. And so God reveals to Samuel, says, Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And when I read that last verse, and I'll read it to you again, it says, this last two verses said, do everything they say to you, do, the Lord replied, for they are not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. They don't want me to be their king any longer. He says, since I brought them out of Egypt, they have continually abandoned me in lives. And now they're giving you the same treatment. In other words, God is saying they're hard-headed, Samuel. They do not want to read the scripture. They don't want to follow it because it makes them have to be accountable in a whole nother area in their life. And basically he said, Samuel, they're giving you the same thing they gave the ones previous before you. This ain't nothing new to me. They won't. Give them a king, because I'm going to show them that they better be careful what they wish for. Family, as we get this morning, the nation, I want point number one. Nation without a king was free to govern. Every man was free to govern according to his own. There were no taxes. You weren't absolutely volunteered to go into the army. There weren't any sanctions and all these things that you had to have the king is these orders and rules and laws in place for us to have to follow. Now all we had to follow was the 10 Commandments. And a man would be able to govern himself by his own heart. But we desire to be like other nations. Be careful what you ask for. I came to point out this morning that family, some of us would rather serve man than God. Now, this might be a little bit heavy, but it is what it is. It's not questions meant for you to answer right now, and don't you look at no street. But it's not the answer, but it's meant to contemplate in your heart. Some of us would rather serve a man than to serve God. Somebody don't believe me. It's like look, like leaving your dream girl. Husbands, look at your wives. You need to know you her dream girl. You got it, Ruby. It's all your. It's like leaving your dream girl or your dream man, and they're standing right in front of you. And you stop and say, but I ain't quite ready yet. Let me shop around a little bit. God said that they don't want me to be their king any longer. Remember the prodigal son? He had everything he needed right there within his own home. But he had to see what was out there. He had to step out and say, let me see how this work over here. That looked real enticing from a distance. Didn't realize when he got up on it, he was looking for junk. How many times you've been looking for junk? Abandoned God, abandoned the God sent, and went looking for junk. And for anybody who feels like that this just don't apply to me, Reverend, I love the Lord with all my heart, all my mind, all my soul. But don't tell nobody I refuse to treat my neighbor as myself. For those of you that don't think it applies, I got a couple questions for you. Ask yourself, how many times could you have simply diffused the situation with an apology or the truth? But you decided, I'm going to choose to continue in this demise because it has benefits for my present situation. Ask yourself this morning. Ask yourself how many times you chose Mr. or Mrs. Popular over Mr. or Mrs. Right.